The other day, I saw a TikTok that seemed a bit too tender for the algorithm. It was this video where a young woman with quite vulnerability asks how she can be prettier. She acknowledges that she's not pretty, at least not in the conventional sense, and asks what kind of haircuts would suit her. What was really nice to see was that the comments were full of some genuine advice, but mostly validation and just sheer disbelief that this woman could believe that she wasn't pretty. It was like a soft chorus of empathy and solicited advice. No trolls, no sarcasm, just a digital crowd affirming her beauty and offering style suggestions like she's a beloved friend in need of a glow up. But this made me think there seems to be quite a focus on wanting to be pretty, on wanting to be attractive, and the idea of glow up culture is always trending, it seems. In this video, we're going to zoom into these overlapping ideas that are central to understanding the beauty frenzy, as I like to call it. We're going to ask, what does this obsession with being prettier really tell us about contemporary cultural views and values around femininity, visibility, and worth? Why, in a world where we're all supposed to be body positive and empowered, are so many young women still scrolling TikTok asking if they're enough? Shouldn't we be beyond that by now? Now, I'm quite lucky that I have distanced myself from this part of TikTok, and my For You page mainly consists of cats, funny animals, anime videos, and politics, which is always fun. But it didn't really take me long to find these kind of videos that encourage the idea of glow-up culture. And I'm sure for many young women, all it takes is scrolling through TikTok for more than 5 minutes to stumble upon the how to be prettier video, or tips on how to glow up, how to appear like this, how to appear like that, how to dress for your body shape, what colours suit you best, what makeup you should wear for your eye shape. The list goes on. These clips form a sprawling ecosystem of pink, soft filters, soothing voiceovers, and bullet-pointed advice that ranges from skincare routines to posture correction, and saying that I should probably fix mine. No wonder I have back issues at the age of 24. I believe that they're part self-care tutorial and part social performance, and they're omnipresent, so to speak, speaks to a shared, often unspoken anxiety. Am I doing femininity right? Now, these videos tend to follow a recognizable formula. Creators may begin with a before image or a confession like, what I wish I knew at 20 instead of at 40, or glow up tips that actually work, how to actually clear up your skin. What follows is a rapid-fire list of aesthetic tweaks, such as, exfoliating twice a week, swap out your makeup wipes for micellar water, brush your brows up, stop slouching, make sure you put your contour on the upper bit of your cheekbones to lift your face, make sure you're making eye contact when you talk to people, apply lip oil, make sure you oil your hair, and most importantly, romanticize your life as if you are the main character. This is often less about drastic transformation, but optimization, a concept that Rosalind Gill links to post-feminist culture, where femininity is treated as a project of constant self-surveillance and importance. In short, it's aesthetic labour, the emotional and physical work that women do to meet normative standards of beauty, which is all, performed as casual advice on social media platforms such as TikTok. And why do creators do this, you may ask? Is it out of the, want to help young women find their beauty and embrace their femininity? Maybe. Or could it be to do with the fact that TikTok rewards this? The more visually polished and algorithmically satisfying the video, the more likes, the more shares and saves that it garners. And what is that not the point, really? But the most revealing part of these videos isn't always the content, it's the comments. If you scroll beneath a how to be prettier or how to fix your skin or how to do your makeup like this or that, you'll find two dominant tones: validation towards the creator and aspiration. These interactions aren't just responses, they're small rituals of self-comparison. Many commenters treat the creator as both an authority figure and a peer. somebody who's just figuring it out, just like them, but is maybe slightly ahead on that journey. Content offers reassurance, and the comments reveal a hunger for validation. But interestingly, this validation isn't just one way. Many commenters compliment the creator's beauty, which is often unprompted, and this flips the advice dynamic on its head. But that in itself is telling. Sociologist Catherine Hakim argues in her theory of erotic capital, beauty can operate as a form of soft power. One that women are encouraged to cultivate, but are simultaneously shamed for relying on. And this kind of links into the next section of our video, where we're going to talk about pretty privilege. I find that a lot of the time, women who are pretty are criticized for having life too easy because they're pretty, but in the same sense are encouraged to use the fact that they're pretty to get what they need. I've mentioned this in videos before, but I've had people say that they respect my content because I don't use my appearance to get views. And it has been infuriating in the past to see fellow creators that just post what I can only say are thirst traps. Now, I'm not against that kind of content, but it doesn't really seem like it requires a lot of effort. Well, this was a misconception that I used to have. All it took was to look good, maybe make a slightly funny joke, voicing over a different sound that was currently trending on TikTok, and bam, 1 million views. It was obviously rewarding and rewarded to look that good. But what about the real important topics? You know, sociology, politics, all that good stuff. I could never make sense. And it took me a long time to come to terms with the idea that, unfortunately, some people do just want to see someone that looks good on their screen. And this contradiction, you know, the idea that we're encouraged to cultivate this beauty whilst we're simultaneously being shamed for it. TikTok, it becomes the stage on which this double bind plays out in real time. In this sense, these videos function less like tutorials and more like communal coping mechanisms, a shared attempt to negotiate the impossible standards we're all quietly drowning in. But let's pull back and ask, what exactly is pretty privilege? Now, if you're anything like me, it was the idea that someone decided that another person was the prettiest girl in the class, and therefore everyone wants to be their friends, all the boys fancy them, and they just seem to get everything right. And when that person isn't you, it can be quite devastating to your self-image and also your ego. And a lot of people may argue that I myself have pretty privilege, even though I wasn't that girl in school and I used to have to rely on being academically smart or developing a personality. And even saying that, it feels like quite a dig to those girls that were conventionally attractive, which is not what I'm trying to do at all. But in teenage Leah's brain, it did seem very unfair. And luckily for me, it didn't happen. But for many people, it can develop into a sense of envy and jealousy that can be crippling. Again, especially as a teenage girl. At its core, pretty privilege refers to the unearned advantages that people deemed conventionally attractive receive in social, sometimes professional, and even legal contexts. It's like capitalism's version of a loyalty card, but only the genetically blessed get to swipe it. It seems like a very online term, but the underlying concept has deep roots in social psychology and sociology, so let's start with the classics. Back in the 1920s, psychologist Edward Thorndike coined the term halo effect, a cognitive bias where our overall impression of someone, usually based on one visible trait, skews how we assess their other qualities. So in practice, if someone is attractive, we tend to assume that they're also smart, kind, competent, and socially gifted. It's like aesthetic trickle-down economics. Though this might not be something that everyone experiences, I know for me, as I have had bad experiences with attractive people, my bias kind of goes the other way. When I see especially women that are good looking, I do feel intimidated or worried that they're going to be mean beneath this demeanor of of attractiveness. But even then, we can see that the way that we perceive someone's appearance often leads us to make assumptions about their other qualities, whether that be good or bad. Now, this bleeds into physical attractive stereotypes, which is well documented in studies that show that attractive individuals are more likely to be judged as successful, sociable, and intelligent, even when there's no evidence to back that up. In other words, if your face fits, society will fill the rest of your CV for you. But, who cares, right? Pretty people just get compliments, why are we so bitter? However, the consequences aren't just about who gets more compliments. Economic sociology has shown that someone's physical appearance has measurable effects on their material life. This study by Hamermesh and Biddle found that attractive people earn 5 to 10% more than their less attractive peers, even after controlling for education and experience. That wage gap is sometimes called the looksism tax, and it functions like a form of soft discrimination that's rarely acknowledged because, well, you can just try harder, right? It's not all about the way you look. But unfortunately, you cannot contour your way out of structural inequality. And more recent research does expand on this, suggesting that attractive individuals are more likely to be hired, promoted, and perceived as trustworthy. So this isn't just about beauty, it's about the social capital that it produces. As theorized by Pierre Bourdieu, social capital refers to the resource we gain through networks and social positioning. Pretty privilege is kind of an aesthetic capital. It gets you invited, listened to, liked, and sometimes paid. And if you want to talk about this within the concept of online adult content, we start to see that the way you look can be used to get you money. And for those of us that don't have that privilege or do not necessarily want to rely on our physical bodies and how they appear aesthetically to garner media attention, views and subscribers, with that said, please like and subscribe, it really helps out the channel. It can feel quite unfair at times, and it's very difficult not to become resentful. Again, I've already discussed this in a video on OnlyFans and female creators if you'd like to check that out. And in digital contexts like TikTok, that privilege is algorithmically enforced. As Terra Nova argues, digital labour isn't just about content creation, it's about visibility. The algorithm has been argued to favour symmetrical faces, smooth lighting, and relatable beauty. What's often praised as authenticity is usually a new performance of polished, effortless naturalness. This idea of the clean girl makeup or no makeup that always seems to come up every few years. Or even comfy wear that actually costs upwards of £100. So when creators ask, how can I be prettier? Or they give advice on how to fix your aesthetic flaws, they're not just chasing compliments, they're vying for survival, where looking good is a literal currency. Now, qualifying for pretty privilege may be effortless for some, but for others, it requires a lengthy routine and dedication to appearance that doesn't sit well with me. If you're like me, you want to stay in bed for as long as possible. Therefore, you don't have time to do your hair and wear a full face of makeup every day. And I can't even count the amount of times where I've lost sleep because I've tried to do those overnight curls or, sock buns or whatever so that I have nice hair in the morning, and it hasn't worked. And also I've just had a very uncomfortable night, all just to go to work and be told that I look awful anyway. And this is what we call aesthetic labour, a term that sounds academic, but it basically describes what your that girl morning routine influencer is doing before 8 a.m. It's that ongoing, unpaid, invisible work of managing your appearance in order to be seen as socially acceptable, hireable, dateable, or even worthy of respect. Because that sounds like fun. I remember once I was eating a chocolate biscuit and someone said to me, "Aren't you meant to be a gym girl? Isn't this going to ruin your figure?" And it made me realise that so many people perceive the act of going to the gym or working out to be a thing that you do to achieve aesthetic gains. When in reality, I've just done it because it makes me feel good. And if I lose a bit of weight and get some muscles as a, secondary effect, then great. That's brilliant. But what I'm not going to do is get up at 5 a.m. so that I can work out and burn all the calories that I'm going to eat for the day, just so that I can achieve an aesthetic build. Now, this concept of aesthetic labour comes from sociologist Wendy Chapkis, who argued that beauty is not a natural state but a project, one disproportionately expected of women. Now, I do want to acknowledge that in terms of bodybuilding and the gym aesthetic, this is encouraged of men too. However, this video is kind of more focused on the makeup and skincare routine part of this rather than the gym build routine. So when we fast forward to 2025, TikTok has turned this project into a group assignment, complete with lighting tips, Amazon storefronts, and water bottle recommendations. But here's the twist. Aesthetic labour is emotional labour too. It's not just about bronzer placement and skincare acids. It's about the obligation to care, to constantly curate yourself in case the algorithm, or in real life, your boss or your ex is watching. And this has a psychological cost. Studies in post-feminist media culture, especially those by Gill, highlight how young women today are caught in this bind. There's this expectation to appear effortlessly confident whilst also relentlessly optimizing yourself. You're supposed to love yourself for who you are, but also be your best self, which somehow always means buying things. The TikTok we began with that inspired this video, where a creator quietly asks how to be prettier, is not a call for glam. It's a moment of burnout, masquerading as a beauty consult. Why does she even feel the need to ask how to be prettier in the first place? Especially when so many comments are reaffirming the fact that she already is pretty. But on the other hand, there's also a reflection of this masquerade. There are people offering curtain bangs and eyebrow gels as a kind of collective care. But the vibe isn't vanity, it's vulnerability. And this ties into this idea that women put it upon ourselves. It's not necessarily because we want to look good. It's more that we want to be perceived as looking good. And that perception is more about wanting acceptance rather than, this idea of vanity. And therein lies the paradox. When aesthetic labour is framed as self-expression, it's often an exhausting performance of compliance disguised as choice. As sociologist Angela McRobbie argues, post-feminism has this issue where it doesn't liberate women from beauty standards. It just rebrands their submission to them as empowerment. If you choose the contour, is it coercion? TikTok, of course, thrives on this tension. The For You page feeds off labour that's visibly pleasing and emotionally resonant. The prettier and more polished you are, the more chance you have to go viral, but only if it looks effortless, of course. Try hard, but don't look like you tried. Because being visibly pretty is aspirational, but being visibly trying to be pretty, well, that's a sin. I would just like to address the elephant in the room, though I am wearing a full face of makeup. However, I could also argue that the reason why I try to make myself look presentable in videos is not just for the algorithm or for the people watching it to see it as aesthetically pleasing, but because I have to sit for hours in post-production editing this face, and I'd rather like what I'm looking at. Now, this is a double-edged sword too. As I've noted, if you try hard to look good, people will point out that you try hard. As much as I like being told, oh, you're really pretty or your hair looks really good, that is not the point of the video. And whilst I make this argument, I do sound like I am a victim of this post-feminist ideal that, these beauty standards are a choice that I've chosen to go along with, and it's nothing to do with the coercion or the constant force of videos of attractive women that I see every day. Let's get real about the silent puppet master behind all of this, the TikTok algorithm. It's the invisible hand swiping left or right on your worthiness, and guess what? It has a type. TikTok doesn't just serve you what you like, it serves you what keeps you watching. And that, more often than not, is content featuring conventionally attractive people. And this is a bias that we're all guilty of, unless we have chosen to constantly challenge it. And it's all about aesthetic, symmetrical faces, dewy skin, good lighting, high cheekbones, and preferably framed by a Dyson Airwrap. But it isn't just a vibe curation, it is algorithmic bias. It's shaping who we see and who gets seen. Whilst TikTok keeps its recommendation system as secretive as an influencer's filler schedule, research and user observation suggest it operates on visual data and engagement metrics. And guess what performs well across all categories? Beauty. As Brooke Erin-Duffy and Isabel Gerard have argued, platforms don't just reflect beauty culture, they manufacture and monetize it. The more you resemble the aesthetic norm, the more you're promoted. Now this creates a feedback loop. Attractive creators get more likes, more reach, and more brand deals, which further validates their content and appearance. Meanwhile, creators who don't conform to Eurocentric or able-bodied beauty ideals, they're often deprioritized or invisibilized. Their content may be shadowed by lower engagement or even flagged for violating vague community guidelines. Numerous Black and plus-size creators have called out their videos being disproportionately taken down or suppressed. In other words, TikTok doesn't just reward beauty, it disciplines it. The platform doesn't just show us what's pretty, it shows us what's allowed to be seen. And the result? An incredibly narrow range of what TikTok defines as relatable or aspirational. And while body positivity and queer beauty movements do exist on the app, they often have to game the sane aesthetic logic. You know, you can be edgy as long as you're hot about it. And this has a chilling effect on creative expression. People don't just perform for the camera, they pre-edit themselves for the algorithm. Aesthetic labor becomes not just about beauty, but about visibility itself. As theorist Noble argued in Algorithms of Oppression, these systems reflect and reinforce existing racial and gender hierarchies. On TikTok, that translates into a beauty hierarchy encoded into the very architecture of attention. So when a creator asks the internet how can they be prettier, they're not always just seeking community advice. They're trying to figure out how to exist more successfully in an algorithmic economy that equates beauty with visibility. Because on TikTok, being seen isn't a right, it's a reward. So if TikTok's algorithm is a gatekeeper, then it's one with a very particular aesthetic preference. And that preference often has racial, gendered, and class-coded undertones. So let's take a moment to examine the effects of these standards. We've already established that pretty privilege exists, but what we haven't asked is what bodies get the light. Because the face that fits TikTok's algorithm isn't just symmetrical, it's often white, thin, cisgender, and able-bodied. Beauty, as we understand and reward it, is still tethered to Eurocentric, heteronormative standards that have dominated media for centuries. This is why intersectionality is crucial. Crenshaw reminds us that systems of oppression like racism, sexism, classism, transphobia don't exist in isolation, they interlock. So when we talk about beauty privilege, we have to talk about who gets access to it and who gets algorithmically sidelined. On TikTok, this may mean that Black creators often report having their content suppressed. Plus-size influencers are often censored for wearing the exact same outfits as thin ones. And when we talk about trans and non-binary creators, they don't only face trolling, but actual deplatforming via shadow bans and account removals. So whilst in theory, TikTok is a platform of discovery, in practice, it's a stage where whiteness, thinness, and wealth are still the main acts. The reason why I bring up wealth is because pretty privilege isn't always just about what you were born with and your genetic facial structure. It's also about who gets access to the things that we can use to enhance our appearances. Looking effortlessly beautiful often requires serious investment. Skincare routines that cost hundreds of pounds, gym memberships that cost you an arm and a leg, aesthetic procedures, ring lights, filters, and the time to make it all look casual. And let's not forget dieting. It's so expensive to eat right and less convenient. So when you're working sometimes 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 hours a day, do you really think you've got time to prep those good meals? As sociologist Beverly Skeggs argues, beauty is deeply classed. Working class women are often not only judged for how they look, but how they do femininity. Too much makeup is cheap or chavvy, and not enough makes them look unkempt. And yet TikTok serves up endless tutorials for becoming that girl. The perfectly groomed ideal of hyper-feminine discipline, with little acknowledgement of the material conditions required to get there. The result is an aesthetic hierarchy that invisibilizes the labour behind the look, whilst punishing those who can't or won't play along. But it's not all doom and gloom. There are some creators that are pushing back. Black influencers, trans models, disabled TikTokers, indigenous content creators, many of whom are not just surviving but are thriving. But they often have to fight to be seen. Their visibility comes with a double burden: to perform excellence and represent a community under scrutiny. It's not just a tutorial, it's a statement. And when someone from that community does something bad or controversial, unfortunately, they are used as the spokesperson for that community, even though these identities are not monolith. So when we say that the algorithm rewards beauty, what we really mean is the algorithm rewards a narrow, hierarchical, and deeply political version of beauty. And everyone outside of that, they're either labouring to fit in or resisting the system entirely. Which brings us back full circle. The question isn't really how to be prettier, it's why we think we have to be. But amidst the endless parade of glow-up tutorials and hot girl walks, there does exist a quiet resistance. A new kind of post occasionally pierces the feed like a feminist flare gun. Being pretty doesn't matter. These videos often feature creators, usually young women, casually dropping truth bombs such as, "I realise I spent most of my life trying to be attractive and I'm done," or "I have 75 beach days a year or summers a year, why have I spent 40 of those hating my body?" And, you don't have to be pretty to be worthy. Just exist. These are simple ideas, but they have radical implication, and this is where body neutrality enters the chat. While body positivity tells us to love our bodies no matter what, body neutrality says that actually you don't have to feel anything special about your body to deserve basic human dignity. Revolutionary, right? That just seems like common sense. The key idea of body neutrality is decentering appearance from self-worth. As philosopher Sandri Lee Barkey noted, even well-meaning affirmations about beauty often recenter it as the most important terrain of womanhood. Body neutrality, by contrast, tries to exit that chat almost entirely. TikTok users embracing this idea often reject both self-hate and the toxic pressure to always be affirming. But it wouldn't be a true Leah 101 video without some philosophy from Butler and Beauvoir. Don't worry, I'll try to keep the jargon under control. Mostly. Now, in The Second Sex, Beauvoir argued that women are cast as the other in society, more seen than being. She wrote that woman is defined as the object, not the subject, which hits differently when you realise that TikTok's main content mode is performing objecthood, usually in 15-second increments. Judith Butler takes this further with gender performativity, which argues that gender isn't something you are, but it's something that you do, repeatedly, in accordance with social norms. So beauty performance on TikTok is peak Butler. The glow up, the transformation reel, the self-surveillance, it's all a daily ritual of doing femininity, which is shaped by cultural expectations and, now, algorithmic reinforcement. So when creators post videos saying that you don't need to care about being pretty anymore, they're not just opting out of eyeliner. They're refusing this entire subject-object binary. They're saying, I'm not here for your gaze, not the algorithms, not for capitalisms, and definitely not for that dude in HR. But even here, things get complicated. Some anti-beauty videos still conform to aesthetic norms, soft lighting, makeup, calming music, so the pushback itself gets aestheticized. Commodified resistance. We do be living in a society, after all. And in this case, it's hard to tell whether we are rejecting beauty standards or simply rebranding them. But these moments matter, not just because they're coming out of my mouth. They represent fractures in the perfectionist facade, and they reveal a growing collective fatigue with aesthetic labour as life's main assignment. You can be tired of performing and still look good doing it, or not. The point is, you get to choose. So where does that leave us? A creator films herself vulnerably asking TikTok how to be prettier and is met with love, tips, and emotional triage. But behind this moment of softness lies a sharp cultural truth. Beauty is still treated as social capital, especially for women and femmes. And that capital is unevenly distributed by algorithms, by systemic bias, and by the market. From the algorithm boosting Eurocentric aesthetics to the soft rebellion of body neutrality, what emerges is a culture grappling with visibility, value, and the labour of appearance. This obsession with being prettier reveals more than vanity. It reveals a world where looking the part is still too often required to be taken seriously. In the cracks of that performance, the resistance grows, sometimes softly, sometimes stylishly, but always politically. But what do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I'm going to go have an existential crisis because I've realised I have inherently criticised myself in this video. But if you did enjoy it, please like and subscribe if you're new. And with that, I'll see you soon.